Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is a podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. Often in life, if we want something done, we need to take matters into our own hands, and my guest today did exactly that. Helen Kapalos is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, recognised journalist, and motivational speaker and facilitator. In addition to her extensive career in media, she served a 4-year term as Victoria's Principal Multicultural Commissioner, where she championed social justice reform for marginalised and disadvantaged communities. I spoke to her about her career, about working her way up in media in Australia, and then taking a plunge, betting her whole life, her savings on creating a documentary that ended up making major impact in Australia and globally. It was aired on Netflix and a number of different streaming platforms. I found it really inspirational. She had a lot of really incredible messages to share, and I'm sure you'll all take a lot out of this interview. Thanks so much for supporting Move Your Mind. If you'd like to purchase the Move Your Mind book, you can go to nickbracks.com/book. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go to nickbracks.com. Helen, thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast amidst a couple of technical issues before we started that I've had happen probably on half of these. So I'm glad we're able to do this chat.
I know, it's just, that's the whole tech thing right now, but it has its own little special bit of magic, I think. Some of the delays are always in your favor, and it's hilarious. We still seem to connect somehow and make it work.
Exactly. No, always seem to make it work, and I guess it's the good with the bad when it comes to using these things and living our life through a lot of technology, or less so now, but doing that. So no, I really appreciate you making the time to come on here. And I guess before we get started, I always ask the guest, just for our listeners, can you give a little bit of a background about yourself and how you came to be doing what you're doing now?
Okay, sure. So essentially, if I had to describe myself in a top line for people that I haven't met before, I've been a journalist. I always wanted to be a journalist ever since I was a young kid. I had a combination of being curious and loving to read and research and asking lots of questions. So it always seemed like the best profession for me to follow. So I've been a journalist for well over 2 decades now, and a documentary maker. Worked for all the Australian commercial networks, 3 of them, and the 2 public broadcasters. And then when my career was sort of ending in terms of in front of the camera stuff, I was appointed as a Multicultural Commissioner in Victoria for 4 years. And then after that time, went on to continue my advocacy role in the space of medicinal cannabis, which is where I had made a documentary. So after I did the documentary, it became legal in Australia. So I'm now in the space working on an advocacy level, but also at a community level as well. So lots of community engagement, and actually mental health is one of the most important touch points in this space. So that sort of sums up, who I am, where I've been. I guess I'm passionate about people and causes, and I think, everything I do, I wouldn't be doing it if it was something that I wasn't aligned to. So I think I've always been able to walk away from things and, take a different direction if it doesn't align with who I am. That's it, really.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing it. And yeah, you've done a lot of varied experiences, but I guess, like you're saying, it's sort of following what you really believe in, and it's such an important message. And I think when it comes to mental health as well, a lot of the time we're not listening to our gut about what it's, that normally if you do listen to your gut, you sort of know what the answer is or what you should do, but we can very easily go against that. So you have to be, a really strong person and very self-aware to be able to do that and make sure that, you make sometimes hard decisions like what you were talking about, and going and, following the path that your gut's telling you to do.
Absolutely. I think for me, one of the mantras that I came to embrace towards the end, there was a couple. One of them was fall down 7 times, get up 8. So I think I always, would put myself in the situation of, well, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen? And, if I can survive that, I'll be okay. And I could always get back on my feet. So I'd always, if I was in a really bad position, sort of reverse engineer and think, how do I? So for example, when I was at my TV career, I felt was ending because it was going in a direction that just wasn't palatable to me and it didn't align with who I was. So I remember at that point thinking, okay, I really want to make this documentary, but I want to fund it myself. So I decided, and it was on medicinal cannabis. So it was a story that I was doing for a primetime network. But again, the network editors were sort of taking it down a very sensational path. And I just felt like people's voices weren't being heard. And I thought, well, I'm in this. The reason I became my why in this profession was to actually tell people's story and give, allow them, to speak and give them a voice that they previously didn't have. So it's about truth telling. And so I remember just making this really difficult decision one day and thinking, well, I have to do the documentary on my own. And what will it do? What will it take to get there? So I mortgaged my house to make the documentary. And I thought, if I can't pay it back, what's the worst thing? So I called my sister and said, hey, if this all fails and I lose my house, can I come and live with you? And she said, absolutely, I'll always be here for you. And that was it. I was prepared to lose it all to walk in my values. And I think it's been a really powerful lesson to me. And I think another thing has been, don't leave before the miracle. So even when I embarked on that path, as rewarding as it was, there were times where I met challenges and I thought, I don't know if this is going in the right direction. And I think being prepared to unlearn what I've learned has been another powerful thing for me in my life.
Wow,
and
yeah.
don't think you know it all. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing of, oh yeah, I know what to do. But then sometimes in a different situation, you've got to go down a different path.
Yeah. I mean, no one can know it all, and it's all about continually learning. And I mean, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's so admirable that you made those decisions and are able to do that, because it's a really scary thing to do. And I guess the world we live in, the society that we live in, tries to really push that fear onto us that we shouldn't go and make those decisions. And parents instill that into us. And like you said, I've done the same thing to this day, where I'm sort of living in different places and building my company and trying to launch this career in the entertainment world. And it's terrifying, and there's so much uncertainty. But then when you do that reverse engineering, you realize, well, hang on, what is the actual worst that can happen? And okay, I go broke. I'll go live at my girlfriend's house. I'll go move back home, and it's not really that big a deal. Like what my day-to-day experience, if that happened, is not going to actually be that dramatic or as bad as I think our minds can be, so creative with, the drama of how bad things are going to be if all of these things don't happen. It's so liberating to realize, no, you can just go and do what you want to do. And, I love that's amazing how you're saying you went and actually wanted to tell this story, this documentary, in a truthful way, in the way that you believed in, and went and did that. And, we can do that. And I think it's so important that people like you are doing what you're doing, because we live in a world where there's just so much garbage out there, and you don't know what's real and what's not. And we just need more authenticity. And I think if that's done in the right way, that'll always rise to the top, the people that do that.
100%. I think for me as well, at that particular time, I guess in a material sense, in a status sense, I sort of had it all. I was in a primetime television role. I was, a lot of free things always came your way, free invitations. There's a lot of adoration and, a lot of so-called friends around me and so on. And it just never sat that well with me. I didn't feel, like it was an authentic life. And I actually thought, gosh, I feel like it's going the other way now. So I do understand when you hear a lot of people say, when they're at the, at that point that, seems like they're at the top of the mountain peak and they think feel empty and, and there's something missing here. I think it's because it's sort of filled with a lot of vacuous stuff. And I think for me, I just knew at that point, if I didn't tell that story properly, it was just such a burning feeling. And I felt like it was almost something being channeled through me as well. So it's hard to explain, but I think I just came to embrace the non-linear pathway at that time. I just thought, I'm not going to ever know what's around the corner, and that's okay. And I remember visiting my dad in Greece, and he said to me, oh, you're mad, you're going to lose everything. This is your TV career. He really felt quite validated at my being on television as well. And that was a bit hard as well, because a lot of people, I was defined that way by so many people. And, it was confronting to them. And, I remember saying to him, this is the best thing I've ever done. And lo and behold, it was interesting to, once I did do the documentary, and I remember going to 3 different production houses. I remember literally not having money to eat. I just honestly don't know how it was just such a bizarre time. But, then a month later, I got a call from a distributor in the US, in New York, and she was pitching it to Netflix, and it was one of 6 Australian documentaries licensed through a global documentary deal, just out of nowhere. And this was literally kind of a backyard documentary in a way. And it still continues to be shown through a lot of public health institutions in the US. That was my aim. The intention was a really strong intention to educate people. And that's really, it's the best thing I ever did, because it's actually what I'm doing now is still continuing on that pathway. But yeah, you're right. We get trapped in the confines of, what everyone else is doing, and social media does make it hard. And, I think all the expectations from our parents are, they can be old school. Mine certainly were. My mum passed away when I was in my 20s, but my dad certainly had that pressure on me. But I think he's come to realize that I've become, that I've been a much happier and much fulfilled individual because of taking that pathway.
Yeah, and leaving more of a mark on the world. I mean, you've already had that other career, but now you're really, putting something out there that, the documentary that's there forever. People can learn from that. There's no time frame on that, and that's a real piece of content that you've created. So it's an interesting thing, like what you're saying, where sort of you identify something you're passionate about. And I've experienced this in the entertainment world, where I wanted to get into acting and started getting into it, and then you get caught up in all of the vanity and all the, the bullshit of it. And then you start not really enjoying, the thing that you were passionate about, and questioning, why am I doing it? And then you have to do this full reset and find out, how do I actually do this in a way that is meaningful, and that I can communicate these messages in, the way I originally wanted to do it. And I think that's just, applies to so many aspects of, again, the world we live in, because we're going to be pulled in so many different directions just by opening up your phone in the morning and looking at all this information and what other people are doing. So you've got to be so strong in identifying, what are my values? What's the purpose I'm actually following? And how do I actually stick to that? And otherwise, it's almost impossible not to get pulled, in 100 different directions.
100%. It's almost like the way brands have to think about themselves, to be single and singular and unified in that vision. And it's always interesting as well, working in the real world, where you see actually a lot of really successful people are very, very unwavering in their vision, and what they, and how their values align with that as well, and how they're, the constellation, I guess, of principles and what's wrapped around that is so entwined with what they're doing that they just can't, you can't go wrong. Even if there is a misstep, or if you're going sideways, it's always a valuable lesson. You're still going forward, because you really understand what that point is, or that origin is. So yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. But it's pretty fascinating in this world of constant distractions, isn't it? Because and I think what I wanted to say too is, when you're talking about resetting, I started to realize towards the end of my television or broadcast or being on air career, if you like, because I don't feel like I'm not working in broadcast anymore. I absolutely still am, but I just have more of a behind the scenes role in producing and directing films these days. But certainly when I was more outward facing, I guess, I did have to reset a lot as well. I did a physical and spiritual reset a lot of the time. And I remember working with a coach who would teach me how to, I guess, feel into the emotion of every single line, every single introduction. And it was so powerful and such a mindful exercise to do when you're reading the news as well. And it was, yeah, I just remember when I was, given those tools, I felt like, my connection to the audiences was strengthened. So that sometimes, those sideways steps or the reset can actually teach you how to come in more powerfully for your audience. And if you're also powerfully connecting to yourself as well, which makes it, again, so meaningful.
Definitely. And I think everything's, the sum of every like thing sort of in retrospect leads to, where we're going, and they're all important experiences. So sometimes we don't realize that as they're happening, but then when you look back, you sort of see, oh, well, I had to go through that to then, be ready for this next stage. And I learned, all of these different lessons from, everything sort of leads to the sort of end sort of goal that you're working towards, or whatever it is. So it's interesting. But are you able to tell me more about the documentary? And I guess I want to hear about, what was that process mentally? How hard was that? How long did it take? How did you, because it's a huge thing to put together, and then to have it sort of, get the outcome that you're talking about. I'm so interested to hear about that.
Well, in my career, so I started in broadcast journalism in my early 20s, and I did a documentary when I was around 27 on the closure of the BHP here in Newcastle. So, when the steelworks were closing, it was a really big deal for the town. And the way that came together was literally I found all this old film footage in the offices of BHP. And then it just became this incredible organic process. And fast forward, however many years later, and the same thing happens with the medicinal cannabis story. I'm thinking, I'm in the middle of the story thinking, this has to be told. And I remember being in the library, in the State Library in Melbourne, researching the topic and thinking, well, what they're doing in Israel is incredible and what they're doing in the States is amazing. But we don't really see or hear all of that put together. So I went back to the drawing board. First of all, I went back to the bosses and said, how about we tell the story like this? They said no. And then I just asked them whether I could actually even asked Kerry Stokes. I went right to, to the CEO of the company and said, okay, I want to put this documentary together. Can I exit my contract early on the proviso that I take some of the, have some of the rights to the story that I've been doing on Sunday night? So that once they said yes to that, I knew it was game on. And then I just went, I thought it would be maybe a 9 or 10 minute feature. So I started storyboarding what it would look like. And then I went to the bank and, said I was getting a kitchen renovated or something. So I pulled out the first $20,000. Then that kitchen renovation got bigger and bigger, up until $300,000. And yeah, it was nuts. I mean, as I started doing it, the storyboard just got bigger and bigger, because when I started, so I, found more and more people. When we actually put the story to air the first time on Channel 7, we ran a poll, and 2.97 million Australians voted in that poll, and around 95 or 96% voted in favour of medicinal cannabis, which to us at that time in 2014 was just like mind-boggling. We just didn't know that there were so many people using it, particularly families that had children with intractable epilepsy. It wasn't just chronic pain or cancer. So anyway, so when I started doing these interviews, and then I just grew and grew and grew. And I think probably I would say that I booked tickets to Israel, found cameramen. I kind of understood the process anyway, of course, through my career. So I directed, produced, and wrote the documentary. And then I hired an old boss from NBN, where I'd started in Newcastle. I really respected his writing, and he had really strong production values. I hired a composer from Newcastle that I'd worked with, and then a bunch of cameramen that I worked with around the country. And then in Israel, hired crews there as well. So it was just, again, totally organic. But I would say 3 months to shoot the entire thing. And then I'd say another 3 months in post-production. I went to 3 different companies to get it right. So probably 6 months altogether, which is just sort of unheard of, really. But as I say, I would work day and night on it. It was just like a person possessed. And I remember visiting my dad when I went to Israel. I went to see dad after, because he lives in Greece. And he was just watching the whole thing. I was shot listing and I was just putting it together and had all the storyboards there. And he was just like, what what are you doing? Yeah, probably 6 months altogether. And then it didn't take long for the Netflix deal to come through. And then SBS also took it for a couple of years so that was a special broadcasting service in Australia, which was fantastic because they're a multicultural broadcaster. So it was just such beautiful alignment with all of it. And the reason I ended up, one of the reasons I got the Multicultural Commissioner position was because during one of those points where I was pretty broke, I was asked to MC the Premier's Gala dinner in Melbourne. And I remember just before I walked up the steps to do my intro, and I just having this feeling of like, I just have to talk about multiculturalism the way it is. I have to talk about how I'm reconciling the identity of an Australian, but also my ancestral heritage and these strengths that I feel like it's brought me. And I just really wanted to be really honest with that, with the audience about that. And it turned out that whatever words or whatever I said, or whatever was spoken that evening resonated with the Premier and the Multicultural Minister, and I was asked to apply for that job. So in all of that sort of despair and not knowing what was coming next, there was another beautiful direction to take. And learning about inclusiveness and diversity up close and so on has led me back to back to, I guess, medicinal cannabis advocacy, but I still work with all the multicultural communities as well. So yeah, to answer your story in a really, really long way, it took about 6 months all up. And then, there was all these wonderful distribution deals, which didn't make the money back, mind you, but it didn't matter. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah. And you sort of, if you go all in on something like that, like you're saying, you sort of don't know exactly what's going to happen, but then all these other avenues have come out of it as well. And I mean, the learning curve, you're saying that you're now producing and doing a lot of behind the scenes work in the industry, that the learning curve from doing that documentary must have just been enormous for now allowing you to go and do other production type work, I guess.
Oh, unbelievable. Well, you won't believe one of the first things that happened when I joined the Multicultural Commission, we were working a lot with marginalised communities, particularly youth. And so one of the things I set up was a partnership, an internship with the ABC, a paid internship with them, which the minister approved, which was terrific. And we had incredible mentorship, and all the kids, like we mostly targeted people from African Australian backgrounds and Muslim backgrounds as well, and other marginalized communities. But the kids that got roles are still in those roles today. And then we created a multicultural film festival. Then we had workshops teaching kids how to actually make films and bringing in. So all of the things that I learned, all the people in that constellation of work all came together again, a lot of them in a pro bono way as well. And I still continue to do that work behind the scenes today. So it's just amazing. It's just unbelievably enriching. So who would have thought that, that one decision to make the documentary then ends up, benefiting multicultural communities in Victoria and leaving all these beautiful legacies sort of pieces with the film festival and so on. So yeah, it's really amazing. I think it's just, to me, I'll never live my life the same way. I will never, ever be comfortable, like being comfortable. I'm always going to, strive for that uncomfortability, because that's where all the magic is. And it's a tough way to live your life. You don't know what's coming next. You certainly have really strong boundaries about what you will accept and what you won't accept. When your values, I guess when you're values led, that's the way. As the Mandalorian says, this is the way. So
yeah, exactly. I find that so inspiring though, because what we're working towards a lot of the time, being comfortable and then trying to have everything sorted out. But for what? Once you get that, then what do you do? Where do you? That's what I never understand. So, and whenever I think about, in the future, I'll finally settle, I'm like, no, I can't. Like, what does settling mean? That sounds like you're killing your soul, basically. Like, what are we stopping for? Like, that's when you stop really being alive and, learning about yourself and other people and doing new things. And it just doesn't really make sense. So I think even if you had all the money in the world, you should have that mindset of, I want to be just challenging myself and doing. I don't want to be comfortable. I need to be out of my comfort zone. I need to be pushing for, whatever it is, whatever your sort of, your gut or your soul or whatever is telling you to do. Because otherwise, what's the point? What are we waiting for? What are we being comfortable for?
Oh, 100%. And if you have all the money in the world, that's when you should really be working hard, I think, to, challenge
Exactly.
what your soul's mission is as well. I really take a lot of inspiration from my dad, who's 87. And he lives in a village in Greece, and he just lives life to the fullest. He's incredible. Like, I love his humor. I love the way that he's so present. I love that, he certainly has been far from perfect. He has, in many ways, probably inflicted a lot of trauma on us kids, but because he's lived some of the quintessential existence of the archetypal Greek man, I guess. And that's a whole other story. But I really love what he's taught me. I love the human values, and I love even, I guess, that sort of street, wise approach that he's had. Like, I feel like my mum was, a lot more sort of conservative, and I guess we got really strong work ethics from her. But I feel like Dad's taught us a lot of emotional intelligence, how things are in the world, how to interact, how to keep energized about things and connecting to causes. And yeah, it's so liberating, the personal freedom that you feel. And I think you're totally right. When I start getting comfy, I'm always like, oh no, something's going to come and bust all this up. I know it. And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah,
So it's pretty
exactly.
funny.
No, it's so relevant. So no, I love everything you're talking about here, and I think for anyone listening, there'll be so many takeaways. So I guess this podcast and a lot of the work I do is focused around mental health. With the medicinal marijuana, is there a big link to mental health? And I know overseas, like you're saying, I've been living in the US, and it's much more embraced over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are the sort of links, and is there a lot of crossover?
Definitely. Well, last night, actually, I was facilitating a Zoom session with a couple of researchers, one who's doing incredible work with, the links to anxiety and particularly post-traumatic stress disorder. So you'd probably be aware in the US and in Australia that a lot of veterans suffer PTSD, and often they don't get a lot of benefits from, the prescription medication, which can be really tough and actually exacerbate those symptoms. So there is absolutely studies that, probably not double-blind, placebo-controlled randomized trials, but it's more real-world evidence. And certainly in that area, the evidence is strong enough for governments to be subsidizing. Particularly, I know in Israel, the PTSD program is subsidised for medicinal cannabis for veterans there. In Australia, it is subsidised for chronic pain, but veterans are also able to take medicinal cannabis, which is subsidised by the government, which is incredible, really. I think there's still work to do there. And now the psychedelics have also, there's also legislation around that as well. So microdosing, some of the psychedelic like psilocybin and MDMA and so on. That's another story, but there's a pretty strong link there as well to some of those treatments. So yeah, there's definitely some really compelling work that is emerging around mental health and types of medicinal cannabis treatment. I think it's slowly being more accepted here in Australia. Definitely, if you look at the prescription numbers, they're doubling, and every year we're seeing a lot more authorised prescribers coming on board. But there's still a really big education piece. But what is interesting is that it does make up a lot of, a big percentage of people that are being treated with medicinal cannabis. It's often related to mental health, anxiety, depression, stress, in its many forms. So yeah, there's a really good story to tell there.
you so much for supporting Move Your Mind. We're expanding the offerings of the organisation and we're tailoring everything we do to suit you guys and to try and answer to all of your needs and the questions that you send in. The book is available globally. You can find all of the links at nickbracks.com/book. And we've just released the Move Your Mind community. We've currently got a men's community group, a women's community group, a general group. We're going to be loading up other groups. And you can find all of the links at moveyourmind.me. This group's been created based on the needs of what we've heard and learnt throughout running Move Your Mind. And we have live events, we've got courses, we've got huge amounts of value, the ability to share information, share ideas, work in groups together to grow and share your learnings, to learn about different topics. You get email reminders. There's a whole lot of features in there. We're constantly updating it, and we're so excited to share it with you. You can find all of the information about it at moveyourmind.me. Yeah, and I guess, it's all education, isn't it? It's crazy that alcohol is just accepted and sort of I've been on and off. Like, I used to binge drink a lot, and then I don't really drink that much anymore. In the last 6 months, I had a break completely. And since doing that, you sort of look at it with a different lens, and really become conscious about how it is embedded in everything we do, every social interaction. You're catching up with someone, with family. It's just so accepted, so part of everything. Yet we're sort of not educated and looking into, just on, like you're talking about here, on just a purely medicinal level, what things like marijuana can do to help people. And it's just, still seems like there's such a long way to go with that conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, what I noticed last night is that we had on our call was, it was essentially geared towards healthcare professionals. And I was amazed, actually, that the education is still really, it's an early moving industry in Australia. I understand that, but I am amazed, actually, that the stigma is as big as it is. And late last year, we met with the Federal Health Minister here in Australia, and that is one of his concerns, I guess, education for healthcare professionals, and being able to roll out the right way, because it's still considered an unregistered medication here. But it's the everything. And when you think about it, it's, 1930s prohibition, propaganda campaigns, and we've all been denied plant medicine because of a propaganda campaign. And I think, so for me, I was never, I've never been into any kind of recreational drugs, and I actually don't drink very much as well. And I'll talk to you about that in a second as well. But I think for me, where I thought the injustice was, and I think for me, I saw it as a human rights issue, because I remembered when my mum was sick with cancer, the opiates weren't working, and we just didn't know that there were other alternatives. And what you really notice is that, particularly in palliative care, it really provides a lot of quality of life. And so for anyone, if we've seen anyone suffer in our life, we'd do anything to ease that suffering. So that's why I think it's a story that does in fact relate to everyone. And on alcohol, I guess with my dad, he was a big smoker, but he's never been a big drinker. And my mum didn't drink either. So I guess my learned behavior was, I didn't embrace drinking at all. Brother and sister, a little bit different, I think. But I guess I was just socialized in a different way. And it's not that I'm judgmental about it, but I am kind of surprised that people go down the drinking path as much as they do. And during COVID, it was really glorified. I noticed on social media, it was like everyone was doing, drinker clocks, and, there'd be work meetings, and it was almost like you're the minority if you don't drink. It's almost like that you're judged. And in fact, I remember someone saying to me during that time, I don't trust people if they're not drinkers. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of social norms around that. I have definitely been exposed to a lot of really big partying environments. Television is just, you can just imagine, you're on the road as well, you're overseas, you're at natural disasters or covering the Olympics or whatever it is, big teams coming together, and it's just everywhere. And when I worked at Current Affair, my nickname was Charlie, because I didn't know what people were talking about when they spoke about Charlie. And so they would always joke with me and say, go back to Newcastle, you're so naive. But but I think it just speaks to the, I was always really happy in those times, and I knew that I could go to a party, be the last one standing, dance and so on, and not need to do that. But I get that that's not everyone. And I think it's just because that's how I learned, when I was growing up, there are other things that I could do. And that was putting my, personality out there, or, like enlarging my energy to cope with that force field, because I think I probably am an addictive personality, and it might have gone the other way. So this is something I talk to my nieces about a lot, because there's 5 of them, and they all have different relationships to addiction and alcohol. And I'm always trying to impress upon them that, I don't know, like, it's not that it's uncool. Like, I guess I'm just trying to say the most powerful thing is to know who you are. So just remember that no matter what decision you're making, know who you are, and be able to walk that path. And that's the biggest lesson I can, impart in them as someone that's been exposed to so many temptations. And I've really never felt the need to yield to them.
Well, I think that point is just so important, because if you know who you are, then, like you're saying, you're not going to feel the need to, or you're going to at least question and why you're doing it. And it's just you start to realize that. Or for me, I've been such a people pleaser in a lot of my life, and then when I started breaking that down, I was like, hang on, if I'm truly comfortable, if I can become more comfortable with myself, do I feel the need to do it? And the answer is normally no. And then you can start making different decisions. But when you're sort of not aware enough about it or thinking that way, then it's so easy just to fall in all of these different behavior patterns. So I think that's such good advice.
100%. And I mean, it's not like we all have vices, we're all going to struggle with something. So it's not as though I'm saying, well, I don't do, alcohol, and how good is that? Well, there's other things that I have to work on as well. But I guess that knowing who you are is knowing that you can also get up. You can fall down 7 times and get up 8, So even if you are on an addiction pathway, and I've watched my dad and other family members struggling with that, I think my message to them is just, you just got to keep going. And, it could be a lifetime work to find out who we truly are and walk down that definitive path. But that's the beauty of it. That's the journey of, and I think what's really amazing about it are the people that we influence along the way, the multiplier effect it has. And so eventually it's how you find your tribes as well, and how you find, that village around you. Yeah. So I think, I take a lot of heart in that. And I think that's an ongoing process, as everything is.
As everything is, but looking at it, in a way where when things are a struggle, when you do fall down that 7 times, that's not a failure, that's learning. Like, where you want to fall down 7 times, because if you just got what you want all the time, where are you going to learn? When are you going to grow? When are you going to question things? How are you going to develop? You're not going to have a backbone to you. So it's sort of so important. That's actually, the things that you need to have happen to then become who you're going to become. So it's it's interesting, and I guess we're not really taught to think that way, but we need to.
No. Oh, 100%. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt that said all those years ago, you must look at, fear in the face every day. You must do the thing that you think you cannot do. So it's really fascinating how over the years, I think over the last 20 years, we've had, like, definitely that conversation has enlarged about looking at failure as a positive and being strengthened and becoming resilient with that. But it's definitely something that hasn't really been taught, I don't think, to us as a life skill. And that does worry me. Again, when I see my nieces, and with what's happening with social media and so on, I just, want them to understand that, that personal strength is something, you will never, like, you have to keep building the muscle of resilience. And so, like, we have to go to the gym every couple of days. Like, it's not something you just build and we walk away. It's something that we have to learn is part of our life, and the greatest rewards will come from there. I know every time I was at my knees, and in the future, if that continues to be the case, I just always know that you can get up again. It's a really powerful thing to know. Maybe life will be altered. I mean, certainly what I will say is that when the television career fell away, wow, I suddenly didn't have a lot of people around me, and there was a very, very different feeling and energy around, the people that had sort of always been around me, and maybe energetically leeching, or even like, I used to pay for a lot of people's stuff, and I was a massive people pleaser, and I probably always will be one. But I've learned to temper that. I've learned to bring in temperance and understand that I don't need to go to those lengths, that I can actually, all the intangible stuff that I'm giving people is actually the most powerful stuff, and the stuff that they need and want more. So it's probably tough for some people where I'm not doing as much as I did, in terms of a monetary thing, but there's just no value in doing that. And yeah, so I've had to kind of rebuild relationships, and some of them have fallen away, and that's probably been a really powerful thing and a good thing for me as well. So yeah, you learn more about yourself, and you learn about the people around you. And it's not to say that they're not good people, but certainly it's just strengthened me in a way that, again, I've, reconnected to the relationship with myself, and, learned to love who I am despite, all the expectations I've thought, people have needed. So I guess in my profession, it's been so outward facing. Maybe in a way I wanted people to love me. It could have been subconsciously something, look, hey, here I am. It was accidental that I became a newsreader, because it was not something I sought. But I remember my cousin saying to me years ago, maybe on some level you've needed to have that validation. And maybe it was, I don't know. But certainly it's interesting, because you'll never get it, really. It can only come from you. So
well, and I think, and that's why what probably got me into acting in that world. I was at the time on a couple of TV things and loving the validation, the instant gratification, thought, oh my God, everyone wants my attention now. I'm going out. People are, coming up to me. How do I get famous? I want to do acting. And then ended up liking it for other reasons. But at the time, doing it to try and fill that void. But like you said, no matter, even if you, even Brad Pitt, if he's not comfortable with himself, it's literally, there's no end to how much. It's like a drug where you just keep needing to absorb more and more. And that's why a lot of these famous people are highly depressed, drug addicts, some of them die early, because it is taking you actually further away from what's real and important in life. It's if you don't manage it properly. So yeah, it's a good lesson.
Oh yeah, I'm a big reader of biographies, and I've read, I don't know, maybe at least a dozen this year. Everyone from Paul Newman to Gina Davis to Richard E. Grant, and it's just been fascinating. That theme resonates in every single biography you read. Particularly Paul Newman's was really interesting, because he had a real issue, with the way that people, I guess, had a relationship with his looks, and so he felt like he got a lot of breaks that other people didn't get, for instance. So it definitely is something that I think a lot of people that we would consider to be, I guess having it all, would probably be, some of the more challenged individuals on the planet, I would think, because where do you get that sustenance from? How do you know? I mean, even for me, it was a little microcosm in TV world, but it does throw you off center to get all of that validation all at once. It's kind of, it can be a drug, I guess, and something that you want to see more of, even in an unconscious way, in an unconscious way. But I think, yeah, that self-sustenance, there's a lot to be said for that, and it's it's a work in progress for all of us.
Exactly. For everyone in a different way. No, so I think that's, yeah, love all. Well, thank you for sharing all of this. I think, yeah, it's so interesting, and appreciate you being so open as well about everything. We finish every episode with 5 closing questions. Before we go into that, are there things that you personally do daily or regularly that just help you, maintain your health, well-being, mental health, in your own life, things that you can share?
Yep, definitely. I think connection to nature is really important. So I always make sure that I try and touch the earth, if you know what I mean. Like, so even just when I'm walking, putting my feet in the sand or in the, in the earth. And I guess I live in an area where I can do that. And no matter where I am, I make sure that that's a discipline. Meditation, even if it's 5 minutes, just anything, just do it. Just make it a discipline. I have a mind that needs to be quietened, and I need to be still, and I recognize that about myself, that I can go, one of my nicknames is Hurricane Helen, so that says it all, I guess. I do other things, like I have this product called Aura Soma, which is just, this like plant thing. I do a ritual with that, and I clean my aura. I have sprays and that type of stuff. So I have those types of tools around me. They're just important for me. They slow me down and center me. So they're the things that I do. And apart from that, I'm obviously, like, just moving is really important for me as well. So whether it's yoga or, I just make sure that I do something every day, because it's great for my mindset. So yeah, I have to make it a discipline. I've realized that a long time ago, because you can, one of those people as well that can be like just high on the highs and then, disastrously low on the lows. So I need to do that for myself. So that's my daily discipline.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think habits and making these daily disciplines that you do, regardless of whether you're feeling good or not feeling good, it is so important, because it's so easy to, fall off it when things are going well. So no, I appreciate you sharing that. These final questions, so these can be sort of short answers, whatever comes to mind. The first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Being on a swing and just swinging up, like a backyard swing, just thinking I could fly through the air.
Love it. What do you think is the biggest burden on mental health currently in society?
Definitely social media. The interconnectedness, I think, is a rabbit hole that we can all fall down.
Yeah. I'd say 95% of people say that same answer. So it's crazy. Yeah. It's not good. What's your personal definition of happiness?
Geez, I should be answering this one really quickly. Just when I can, just being connected to people, fully connected to family and friends, and that's definitely my personal definition. Just the joy from those relationships.
Yeah. What are you most afraid of?
I don't know, because I've done it all, I guess. I've been broke about 10 times.
Yeah, you faced them all.
What am I most afraid of? Oh, losing people I love. Yeah.
That's a big one. Well, final one. What are you most proud of?
My ability to get up again. Yeah. And I'm proud of my nieces and the people around me as well. So just proud of people's resilience, I think, in general. So, and I think for me, how that's played out in my life as well. Just proud that I've been able to get up and just keep going.
Love it. And for anyone listening, if they want to learn more about you or the work you're doing, we'll put this in the show notes, but where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I'm thinking about I've got a website, which is just helenkapalos.com.au. I'm on LinkedIn and social media, so Instagram and Facebook and that type of thing. And I guess there's different messages on each of those platforms. So yeah, that's the best place. But always happy to chat to people individually. So if they want to contact me directly through those channels, feel free.
Great. Well, we'll put all of the links to all of those channels in the show notes. So anyone listening, make sure to go and check them out. And Helen, thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast. Really enjoyed chatting to you. And I personally took so much out of this, find your story and all these messages so inspiring. And I think it's incredible what you're doing. And yeah, I know you're busy, so appreciate you setting aside the time to come and talk to me.
Oh, thank you so much. And also really inspired by what you're doing. I love your book. It's just, I've bought it for a couple of my nieces, and keep doing the great work, because you never know how many people it's impacting, and potentially how many lives it's also saving as well. Don't underestimate the power of what you're doing. It's wonderful. And just keep walking through, that uncertainty, because all that treasure is right ahead of you. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Helen Kapalos for joining me today for Move Your Mind. If you'd like to learn more, you can purchase the Move Your Mind book at nickbracks.com/book, or you can just simply go to nickbracks.com.